this meeting, and that has commenced just now. And I'm calling this meeting to order. Who is taking notes this week? Do we have somebody that had previously volunteered on the team? Okay, so in 2021, we should put that as an agenda item for the next time, but we do need a willing participant to be a note taker today. It does not have to be somebody that is an official member of the task force, but someone who may be more familiar with the process would be welcome. Any takers? Ryan?
I can go ahead and do it.
Always amazing. You really don't cease to amaze me, so thank you. Let's all make note that this is definitely more than once or twice that Ryan has done this. So in the effort to share the love, let's think about this, and maybe we'll add this as new business at the bottom. Someone can make that motion. So at 6:05, I've called the meeting of the Racial Equity and Justice Task Force to order. If we could all please rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I hope I got that right. Okay, welcome. Welcome to members, one and all. Welcome to our ad hoc members and committee members at large. Welcome to our guests, our special guests, to my very beloved friend and co-chair, Gina. I hope you all had a happy, healthy holiday season. I think I probably can speak for all of us when I say 2020 is now in the rearview mirror with some sense of glee and joy, and we can look forward to a healthier, more hopeful 2021. With that, is there a motion to approve the minutes? And they were just sent out, so hopefully you've all had a chance to peruse. And for those of you new to the meeting, when we do take votes, we're only asking the official task force members to vote. So no need to weigh in there. So that's just so you understand what's going on. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of our December 15th regular meeting? Is there a second to that? Gina? Any discussion? So all in favor? Show of hands. Any noes? Any abstentions? Okay, so those board minutes are approved unanimously. Item number 4, moving right along to hear, consider, and act on website additions. And here I have to thank Alex and Ryan so much for carving and crafting the beginnings of our very thorough website. I'm really pleased in the direction it's going, and want to call attention to a few things. There was a media list which I had shared, which I tried to make thorough. It's by no means complete, but I just thought try to throw everything on there without commentary. We did talk at our last meeting at some point when we maybe are in more of a groove or there's not so much immediate homework, we can each take on the task of reviewing some of this and putting our own imprint. But for now, we're just going to, with Ryan's help, figure out the best way to put that media list up there. The other thing that, thank you so much to Kathy, we have this list of definitions. Kathy, did you share that with everybody, or was that just to me and Gina?
I sent it to you and Gina, and I think I copied Alex, but I wasn't sure about distribution rules, whether I should send it or whether she should send it or how it goes out. So
what we should have done is, and my bad because I knew this, is shared it as a supplemental item for today's agenda to give people a chance to look at it, so that we could have then just approved it and it could have gone up. What I may do is make a motion to accept it as is, put it on the website, and then for homework, ask people to, only because I think at this point, not a lot of eyes are on that. And so it'll just be up there so we can look at it. And if there are changes to it, we can make them, but then that's a way for us to distribute it publicly. So, and because I don't want to delay, but if anyone has a different thought or idea, Gina, since you've seen it, maybe you feel differently. You're on mute. Nope, you're not on mute. You just are having issues. Dang. Do you want to type in the chat if you think that's acceptable or if you'd rather pause? I have you here as muted. Let me try. See if I can.
Got it.
Oh, there
Thank
you
you.
are.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea.
All right, so I move to submit the definitions as submitted to us by Kathy Wyant to be put on the website. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, so Doug seconds it. Any discussion?
Can we go ahead and send it out to the group to review too? While we're on the call, just so people have it on them.
Yeah, so
I can send it right now.
so we're going to do that as an attachment. And I think that that's fine because we're going to put it, it's going to be up there anyway.
Down approving them if we haven't read them.
But what I was saying is what we're doing is approving, we're not approving the definitions. What we're approving is the ability to just put them on the website, and then you'll look at them and then we can edit them. But if you'd rather they don't get out into the public.
No, that's fine. Plus I certainly trust you all, but I'm just saying, like,
you're not approving the definitions.
Sure, put them up there if we haven't looked at them. That's a hard ask.
Okay, so then I made the motion, but we can, and it was seconded, so we can vote against it.
This is the discussion part.
Yeah.
We can, I mean, is everything on the website live at this point?
Everything as you see it when you pull in the, yes, so do you want me to pull it up?
So you're wanting to put it on live?
Okay, so let me.
Well, no, I just didn't know if we were talking about like putting it live.
There are things on the web, like when we went in to make all the changes that we discussed last time, we discovered that there were certain things that we weren't actually able to move around. So we're now in touch with the web master for the town, who is going to try to do some of those things for us. So it's a little bit of a process to get it reorganized the way we wanted it. And then once we get this additional information, which like, Nancy's list is very long, we'll see. We had an idea about how to organize it. So we'll see how that will work. So it's a little bit of a process anyway. So this isn't going to go up like immediately. We want to get,
and generally,
but what's up there now are the few changes that we made to just make things a little bit clearer and, cleaned up a little bit, but there's still work to be done for sure.
So
I think it's good practice to, because I think generally these things don't happen live. They kind of build them and then you look at them and you make your edits and then they go live. Like they don't edit as you go. So I was thinking that what we were talking about is it'll go in sort of the working draft.
Oh, okay.
That because we're
no, once you put it up there, it's live.
No, okay. So then you know what? Let's withdraw the motion or vote against the motion, because it sounds like there's still a little hesitance, which is fine. And we can just put it in the backup for next time. So it gives people a chance to review it.
I just think that, it's unlikely that people will read the definitions in draft form, but if they did, we want to be a credible source. We don't want to be a work in progress for the general public. So,
Can
you withdraw a motion?
It was seconded, so I actually don't know the Robert's rules on that.
why don't we just vote?
So let's vote just to keep it simple. And anyone in favor? Anyone against? Show of hands. Did you want to abstain? Or you're against? Okay, so unanimously against, and we will,
We'll
just
review
put
it
it, we'll
and
review
revise
it,
it.
so it'll be in the backup material for next agenda. Perfect. And, you know, whether we wait 2 weeks, this is not gonna be, you know, mission critical here. So the attached media list, any objections there? You had a chance to look at it, or Gina, what do you want to say there?
I mean, it was pretty lengthy, and I was just wondering, like, I think to Karen's point, we want to make sure that there's not going to be like that one surprising thing that somebody's going to find, because someone will find it. So we want to make sure that we've thoroughly reviewed the list, just to make sure. So where did the list come from?
I just called it together from, you can see this, it's an amalgamation. I just scoured various, you know, I did research and put them all together from sources. And you can see the sources there. So it's not just one source. It's like,
would it make, I mean, I think it's really great. I think that we may need to have some sort of disclaimer about it. You know, that these are from independent sources, and, you know, we are not saying that we represent any of this media, because again, you know, you have like one person who does something bizarre, and then all of a sudden we're connected to them as someone we've recommended. So I think we need to have like kind of a disclaimer statement that this is a media list that we've, you know, pulled together from other sources, and making sure that those sources are very prominently displayed, so people understand that, you know, we're not endorsing any of this media, but these are sources that we think are credible sources, I guess.
okay, so what I'll do then for the next agenda as well is I'll work on a disclaimer paragraph before we post the, so we don't need to act on anything. I'll work on a disclaimer paragraph that just says exactly that, and Jean, I'll share it with you. And then we can vote on that language next time, unless anyone feels strongly about writing disclaimer language. I don't mean to take that away from somebody. All right, perfect. So, and same with the definitions. Alex, were you on that list? Kathy, if you could send to Alex your definitions directly, just so she can distribute. You know what? I'm going to send it within. Okay, perfect. Yeah. And what I'll do is on the next agenda, just reference it.
We can just put an item on the agenda of website review.
Okay.
And then perfect. Anything, either we'll review these 2 items, anything that comes up in the intervening time.
Yep.
And maybe we can just sort of, you know, if anybody has something that they want to submit to be on the website, just make sure that it's in their hands before the meeting, so that they can distribute it with the agenda.
Right. So just, I've been trying to do the agendas, you know, before the 24 hours in advance. It just, what happens is it all like sneaks up on me. So if you have, I'm going to try to do it sooner. So if you send something to me more than 24 hours in advance, it'll kind of give me the push I need to do that. So anything else on the website, you know, Ryan or anyone else at this point to add or to update us with? Any questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. And thank you.
Do we have any metrics on the website accessible in terms of just tracking views or?
I haven't asked. I could ask.
I would say at this point we haven't done, and down the line we should absolutely make a push, because I think it's another opportunity for us to have a public presence to kind of like, hey, this is our website and this is up, and we can use the definition list and the media list and other things as a way of promoting ourselves. Back to the point Karen made many weeks ago, you know, about pushing out and like press releases. This is just another opportunity. So I can't imagine that traffic at this point is, you know, anything other than us. Which actually does lead me to a question, Ryan, Alex, maybe you know the answer to this. I had asked one of our guests on the line if she pushed out to find the information, or if she was able to like sign up. I know there's a way you can sign up for town calendars and you get sent agendas. Can we figure out how we can do that for racial equity, justice, and task force meetings and agendas? I think there's
a mechanism that pushes out. Okay, well, as Brian mentioned, we're in communication with Mary's colleagues while she's out this week. So when we hear back from them, we can certainly ask about that as well.
It's great. Like on the town website, apparently you can like check a box, like I want to receive this and I want to receive this. And you can tick a box that says, and it just may not be set up yet, but it would be great that anyone that wants to sign up. And again, it's another opportunity to say, hey, join our mailing list. And to also start to collect, to build a database of people who are inclined to learn more about us. And so Kathy, thank you for all your help with the definitions and that beautiful graphic and your thoughtful work here. So look forward to discussing as a group next time. So before we leave website, going once, going twice, any additional questions about the website? Okay. Moving right along, Devin, returning to you. I'm very excited and pleased to introduce you to Devin Kupchak. Devin's dad, I believe, Tony, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Is someone that Gina and I had a chance to talk to about participation in this group, and through that and becoming aware of our efforts, he made me aware of the work that Devin was doing, and she's here to make a presentation to us. So please join me in welcoming Devin. Even though it says Christine, she really is Devin. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Devin. I am in 7th grade in middle school. I go to Fairfield Woods, and I was making this presentation for a health project that I have to do.
Well, that's great. And it's really wonderful that you wanted to share it with us. So thank you. And the floor is yours.
Thank you.
So I don't know how I should do. Can you just share your screen, or let's see, do I have to make you a host? How did we figure that out last time?
I think I can just share it.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Yep. And let's see if you can, there's like a presentation mode, but I think that, yeah, perfect. Beautiful. Okay, thanks.
So, hello, and this is my presentation on Black Lives Matter history and current events. So, in July 2013, the Black Lives Matter movement began with the Black Lives Matter hashtag on social media after finding George Zimmerman not guilty after the murder of African-American teen Trayvon Martin 17 months earlier. The official Black Lives Matter organization was formed by Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi. Since the start of Black Lives Matter, the organization has grown massively. They now work with people every day to make a difference. The Black Lives Matter protests began to gain more attention after the murder of George Floyd at the hands of a cop after using a counterfeit $20 bill. The Black Lives Matter protests and supporters fight against the police brutality and inequality. Black Lives Matter also focuses on queer and trans people of color, seeing as they are targeted often. Another large event that caused the Black Lives Matter movement to gain more attention is the Justice for Breonna Taylor movement. That started after she was shot by a police officer during a botched police raid in her apartment. What is white privilege? White privilege is inherent advantages possessed by a white person on the basis of their race in a society characterized by racial inequality and injustice. White privilege, now more than ever, has become a more prominent issue in our society, considering things like racial injustice and the Black Lives Matter movements. White privilege is something that divides things like healthcare, education, and jobs. There are ways to support the Black Lives Matter movement, whether you can attend protests or not. A good way to support Black Lives Matter or other organizations is by donating. The money can go towards things like bailing protesters who are wrongfully jailed. These funds can also go to families who have lost a family member due to police brutality. Another way to help, if you can't attend a protest, is by finding petitions to sign. You can easily find petitions to fight for things like having the police officers who were present at George Floyd's murder to be charged with murder. There are also many petitions for Breonna Taylor and many others. There are also ways to help while you're at a protest if you can attend one. For example, sometimes at protests, white allies will form a wall in between Black protesters and police. This is used to help make it safer for other protesters and help protect people. Another way to help at a protest is to bring the right supplies. It is good to bring things like water and extra masks for yourself and others if they need it. Other items like hand sanitizer are also a good item to bring to stay healthy and safe. This concludes my presentation, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity to present. I learned a lot while making it, and I hope you learned something.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Devin.
So any immediate responses or questions from the group?
Thank you so much for coming to share with us, Devin. What made you decide to come and talk to us tonight?
Well, for the initial project was we were given 7 habits to lead to a successful goal. And I wanted to make my project something that would help others and spread awareness about issues in our society.
Oh, that's an excellent idea. And I'm glad that you chose what you chose. And, you know, hopefully you'll be in Fairfield long enough to sit on this panel one day.
Thank you.
Are you involved with Mrs. McHugh's group? Miss McHugh's group? I know that there's a group at your school that is actually looking at equity and justice at Woods. Do you know anything about it?
No.
Well, next time you're in gym, ask Miss McHugh about it. I think I just heard that they just did a presentation recently. So I think there's other people in your building who have some of the same passions that you have. And it's always exciting to see young people in our community who really are, you know, reaching out about issues and understanding how it affects you directly, even though some may think it's indirectly. So thank you.
Welcome.
Have you presented to your classmates or to your school yet?
I have not, but I do plan on it.
Well, it's amazing and really brave and courageous that you started with a group of adults that you've never met before. You were really articulate. And where did you find most of your information? Did you look online or did you?
I did a lot of research online, mostly.
And is it something that you and your friends talk about? Like, is there a lot of chatter about this at school?
No. Not often, no. Very occasionally will me and my friends talk about something like this.
Well, I think your presentation will help start a conversation at your school, separate from the ones that Ms. McHugh are having. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Devin?
I'll ask one question, Devin. I love what you're doing. My kids all went to Woods too and all did that project, and don't tell them, but I really like yours a lot. A lot more is the subtext. What I would love to ask you is, how did this topic get on your radar? Do you remember the first time you became aware of it? Was it from conversation with your parents or watching the news or social media? Like, how did this even become a thing that you thought about?
Well, it came a lot from my parents and stuff I've seen on the news. And I saw it and I was like, this is something that you should make a difference in.
Nice. Thank you for having that thought and that heart for this.
All right, well, with no further questions or comments, Devin, thank you so much. You are more than welcome to sit and listen to the work that we are doing here tonight. No pressure, and you can log off at any time. So please feel free to listen in or log out as you so choose. So thank you again for joining us and for taking the time to share that with us. So next up, I wanted to talk, and Gina and I wanted to talk to you about a few things. The chief of police, Chris Liddy, as you all may have heard, has resigned. That's one. There is an employee contract that was passed, is in the process of going through the various boards, and it's called the VERA plan, and it's an early retirement plan that the first select woman has put through. It's really her kind of signature first program where I don't know if any of you are familiar with VERA programs, but basically it's a package for town employees that they can opt in to retire with a package. And what that's going to mean for hiring, I think there's an opportunity for us, and I don't know how this ties into the deep listening and then the next phase, but it's certainly an opportunity to talk about the HR piece as we're going to be bringing in new employees and what it's going to look like as people retire, and again, just with an eye on the first select woman's mission of part of the VERA for her, the rationale was the modernization of the town hall and to make some of the staffing more efficient. And so I do think there's an opportunity there. And then there was some news out of Shelton where the police department hired a new police officer who was fired for ethics breaches. And I'm saying this without judgment because I don't know full facts, so I'm just stating this factually, that the Shelton police officer was fired for breach of ethics, among other things. And that's not the exact official language for misconduct. And while there is a vetting process here, and again, many sides to a story, I just think it's worth sort of talking about in the overall vein of employment with the chief of police retiring. So I think it's probably ripe for discussion here. So I don't want to lead the discussion. I just wanted to put it out there.
So I asked Nancy to add it on the agenda for a couple of things. I think you covered a lot of things, Nancy, and I didn't even know about the VERA plan, but I think in terms of what it is that we do and what is that this task force is going to do and where we are historically right now, a town embarking on a mission to find a new police chief in 2021 should look different than it did before. Mm-hmm. There are things that, I think the town needs to consider that maybe weren't at the forefront. And there are things that this group represents that I think that I would like to kind of talk to you all about how you feel about, us being part of the conversation. And what is it that you think, what do you think we as a group should do? Because I feel like there is an expectation that we should be paying very, very close attention to this hire, right? And primarily because the last person was in the job for 40 years. I mean, he really set the tone for what happened for more than any of us have been involved in Fairfield. And this next person is going to have the opportunity to do the exact same thing. If they hire someone who's young enough to be in this job for 40 years, that person will then set the tone. And I think it's really important that as the town Equity and Justice Task Force, that we really think really carefully about what do we do with this information? How do we as a group, what do we want to say that we want to do? Because I know down the road, part of the plan was that the task force would probably come up with something, and I thought that they'd have more time, that at the end, when we had our blueprint in a year, part of it would be, this is what we've come up with for hiring all across the board. And I know we still have a lot of work to do considering about hiring, but now this decision, when is it starting? The 31st, right? So like, we have this meeting and next meeting.
Yeah, and I will share, because I had, I know it's not our line item yet to talk about findings, and we're not done by any means looking at all the interviews with the team of us that's doing that, but that's one of the things I already put in a draft kind of summary, is different departments saying we need to look at hiring practices. And I in the context of what Nancy was just saying, I was like, oh, we were just talking about that, because there's some there's some recruitment practices that might be kind of not serving us well in terms of equity and diversity, that are, a lot of times, word of mouth, who do you know, who do you recommend, referral based, and not necessarily broadcast in a different way. I don't know the ins and outs of them because I'm not in HR or anything about that, but.
So I just want to clarify a couple of things that Gina just said. Chief Liddy has been in the chief position for about 2 years. His predecessor was Gary McNamara.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
And but he's been part of the police department for 38 years for sure. And the complicated thing here, and welcome Sonia, is that there is a board and commission that is responsible for the hiring of the police chief. So this is not a first select woman decision. There's a lot that goes into it. And I actually have a call into a commissioner on the police commission to understand better how this, but because of the holiday, we've been missing each other, to better understand this. And again, this goes back to, everything being, as much as we try for things not to be political, who serves on those boards and commissions can be a political endeavor. So I think it's twofold, Karen. I think that there is hiring practices for sure, and there's the HR piece. And while we may not have an opportunity to have an imprint per se on the chief position, how they go about recruiting and all of that, I think is like a really important topic, but also from an HR perspective for sure, but also looking at who's serving on these boards and commissions.
I agree, Nancy, but I also think it's really important that we as a group remember that one of the reasons why this group ostensibly exists is to represent voices that are unheard. And this is an opportunity for us to kind of remind this commission that has been put together, and outside of politics, this is about the country is asking us to be very thoughtful about policing, and they're asking us to do it through the lens of marginalized people. And this group represents marginalized people in this town. I mean, I dare say this is probably the most diverse group that the town has. And I'm guessing, but I'm probably not off from that. And so I think while we may not necessarily have be empowered in any way to do anything, we are empowered as a group to decide what we want to say about it.
So then
we can ask. Right?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. Maybe we ask the chair of the police commission to join this call next time, just to explain where they are at, and at least extend the invitation. I also just before you jump in, Doug, I just want to remind all the anyone who's on this call that we do have a bit more of a free form, so that even if you're not an official task force member and you want to make a comment, please just write in the chat and we'll recognize you. So don't feel shy if you have something to say. Sorry, Doug.
Steve, go ahead.
It was Steve.
Yeah, it was Steve. Hey guys, I'm sorry. Yeah, so just looking at best practices, and we were looking at Team Westport. They're absolutely involved in the hiring process of a police chief, and I think that we should push for that. And we need to be, like, for the reasons that Gina said, absolutely, that's one of the critical things that this task force needs to be involved with.
So I go back to my question. Go ahead.
I mean, this is sort of the enduring issue, because it seems pretty clear that we will be making recommendations about hiring and recruitment and things like that for the 2022 report. But the question is, what is our role? What's our sort of charge to be active right now in the present around these issues? And I personally feel we should find a way to do it, but it just feels like it does run a bit counter to what our original charge was. So it feels like it's a little sensitive still.
Yes, the timing is such that I mean, we have to make a decision if that's, or ask, I mean, maybe we go to Brenda. Like, this is at the top of our list and here it is. What do we do?
You know, this will be a recommendation a year from now, but
right
now it's particularly salient. We'd like to pre-recommend it.
So with that, there are mechanisms in place. We know that. So there is a process, and the process we know is the, and I just want to, I'll stop what I'm saying mid-thought to say that we need to be a watchdog, if nothing else, per Ryan, and that we do have to escalate our input. I agree. And I think we're all sort of leaning towards that, everyone who's commented. Jamie is encouraging us to sign up for the panel with the religious leaders and the chiefs of police in Westport and Weston. Fody, who's the chief of police in Westport, is also a Fairfield resident and is, Fairfield and Westport do closely work together. If you can share a link to that, Jamie, in this chat, that would be great. So there is a mechanism in place. As I was saying, I started to ask the question. I will call my one of my connections. I will follow up tomorrow. I've been trying to reach one of the commissioners. Do we invite them to the call? I don't know how quickly. So I feel like that's one question we need to have answered, right away. He is retiring at the end of the month. Like, is it automatically per union that there are a couple of people who are next in line? So it may be that
ultimately, at the very least, this body has an opinion that I think we have a duty to share. I don't know what our opinion is. We need to kind of collectively decide, what do we as the Racial Justice and Equity Task Force believe should happen in terms of this? And I almost want to think, like, Ken is going to speak to us a little bit, who I think knows a lot more about policing in Connecticut, and maybe we'll think about it more. But at the very least, even though we don't know what people are going to invite us to do, I think we do have a charge to say something. We stand as a reminder that the first select woman made a commitment to racial justice and equity in Fairfield.
And signed that pledge, the Brothers
and
Keeper pledge. So why don't we then table this discussion, switch over to item number 7, which is to hear from our special guest, Steve. I don't know if you want to tee that up, and Ken, welcome. And then as part of our kind of deep listening next steps, we can circle back to this because maybe some more, language will reveal itself. And in the meantime, separately, I will talk to the police commission member and can reach out to this group. So is that okay with everyone in terms of, Steve, I'll turn it to you. If you could introduce Ken and set that up, and then we can hear from Ken and then circle back.
Sounds good. So
if I may, Steve, because I would just want to say one thing. In our mission, it of course it says we end with a blueprint, but it also says there may be other things. So I don't want it to be like, oh no, it's happening prematurely to be in our way if we have a proposal to submit. It doesn't say, and we won't submit any other proposals for the next year. Or, I feel like we have some leeway because we didn't define what we won't be doing. We just defined what we will.
We didn't even say how we were going to do it. So this could just be phase 1.
Right.
Exactly.
Every now and then you may get a proposal.
That's all Gina, by the way. She kept pushing to make sure we could have teeth. And here may be an opportunity to have some more teeth. So,
okay, zip for me.
Steve, to you.
Okay, so Ken Barone with the Connecticut Racial Profiling Project. I guess he's been with it since 2012. I've been following it about that long, and it's fascinating. And Fairfield has the distinction of being a standout for some of the practices that they engage in. Ken was kind kind enough to join us and kind of explain a little bit about the project. It's done through Southern Connecticut State University. And I guess, Ken, I'll let you go ahead and jump right in. You there?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, folks. Thanks for having me. I've had a number of conversations in the past with Steve, and I thought it would be helpful today if I came and talked to you a bit about our work, and particularly as it relates to Fairfield, as I know you're, I think, speaking about many of the issues that we might have some relationship to. So again, Ken Barone, I work for Public Policy Institute at Central Connecticut State University. Back in 2011, just quick 2-minute brief, FBI came in and arrested a number of police officers in East Haven, Connecticut. You may be familiar with the case. And they were arrested for violating the civil rights of members, in particular of the Hispanic and Latino community. And so that caused the state to look at their racial profiling law, which was on the books, was passed in 1999. And a lot of questions arose as to why the FBI came in to, to identify this issue, and why the state hadn't been on top of it, since we had this law on the books that was intended to A, ban racial profiling, and B, track who was being pulled over and study whether or not police were disproportionately impacting different groups of people. And so we got asked by the governor at the time, Governor Malloy, to help rewrite the law, put together a statewide advisory board, and to oversee the implementation of the law. So the law was rewritten in 2012. It's referred to as the Alvin W. Penn Act, named after the late Senator Alvin Penn from Bridgeport, Connecticut, who had originally pushed to have this bill passed when he was in the legislature before his death. And it was named after him after his death. Starting on October 1st, 2013, we began collecting 26 pieces of information on every single person pulled over by the police through a traffic stop. We focus on traffic stops because they are the most common encounter that law enforcement have with the public. And when you're trying to build a system to study and research basic interactions between law enforcement and the community they serve, that's a very data-rich environment to do that in. And we aren't the first state to do this. There are about 30 other states around the country that collect information and analyze it on traffic stops. That being said, we have become a national model for other states. Our program that we use here in Connecticut has been replicated in a number of other states. Rhode Island, California, Oregon are examples. They've taken our program and replicated it there. What we do in Connecticut that's different from the way other states have handled this is we don't simply point the finger at police departments and walk away, but we try and drill down and really understand what are the factors driving disparities in particular communities. Now, the process we have, I like to refer to it as triage. We have 107 police departments in the state of Connecticut, over 9,000 police officers. In order to do the type of analysis that, I might like to do for all 107 police departments every single year is just not practical, right? We just don't have the resources to do that for 107 departments. We are required by law to analyze every department every year. And so what we did was we designed a system where every police department gets evaluated based on a variety of different statistical methods. So when we started this work, we looked across the country and said, who's doing this work well? And what we found was states were doing one of two things. They were collecting data on who was stopped, and they were just putting it out there. They're saying, well, 20% of the people stopped in town A were Black. Make of it what you will. Or they would compare who was stopped to some sort of a census benchmark. 20% of the population stopped is Black, but 10% of the population that lives in this town is Black. Therefore, there must be a disparity. And what we saw happening across the country pretty consistently is that data was being used to further divide law enforcement and the communities they serve, as opposed to being used as a tool that can try and bring them together and improve inequality. And so we decided that we didn't think that it was the best approach to simply do a report every year that points the fingers at a bunch of departments that might have problems and then walk away. We also didn't want to rely on only one indicator. We didn't want to put all of our eggs in the census basket, for example, because what we found was happening is police departments, when states used or researchers used one method to determine if there was a problem, oftentimes, members of the community would say, look, there's a problem here, we've got to do something about it. And law enforcement would say, but the researchers didn't know what they were doing and they didn't account for these 10 things. And so we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what's the best way to evaluate this data so that there aren't any shortcomings. And what we realized is there really aren't any perfect ways to evaluate traffic stop data for racial disparities that don't have any shortcomings. But what we decided to do, sorry, Steve, I'm getting a little, okay, it's gone. So we decided not to rely on only one way to measure disparities for a department. Every department today gets evaluated against 7 different indicators. And our idea, the concept we've developed, we call the preponderance of the evidence approach. The idea being that if a department shows up with significant disparities, regardless of how you look at it, across the different ways that you try and evaluate the data, all the methods are different, and you're still showing up, then we believe that that warrants a further analysis. And so the first part of our process is to run every department, evaluate them against the same 7 measures, and then we have a protocol that our 20-member advisory board has agreed to. It's an advisory board and state statute made up of law enforcement representatives, advocates, different representatives from different state agencies, researchers. They said, here's the criteria for what we believe warrants additional analysis. Anybody who exceeds this threshold is going to have a deeper dive. So since 2013, we've collected almost 4 million information on almost 4 million traffic stops. We've produced 4 or 5 statewide reports. We're in the process of completing our 6th. And we have identified 28 of our 94 municipal police departments that over the course of those 5 reports met our threshold for requiring additional analysis. And the additional analysis piece is fairly extensive and fairly labor intensive. So if you're a department that's identified for initial analysis, the first thing we do is meet with you. We walk through why you got identified. We answer any of your questions. We run through the full report. We walk through each test and where the department scored. We walk through the advantages or perceived disadvantages of particular methods so that department understands the context. We then lay out our full follow-up analysis where we say, okay, we're now going to go in and we're going to map all your traffic stops. We're going to drill down by neighborhood and roadway and try and understand where you're enforcing your traffic laws, why you're enforcing laws the way you are in certain neighborhoods, how that correlates with crime, with calls to 911, with motor vehicle accidents, with traffic volume. So we want to understand why are there 2 cops in this patrol beat and 1 cop in this patrol beat? There's oftentimes lots of reasons for that. We try and understand what that is. And ultimately, we put together a fairly comprehensive assessment about the factors that we believe may and may not be contributing to disparities in a particular department. So the Fairfield Police Department was identified in our 2017 report. They were, at the time, one of 2 departments identified that year, Derby and Fairfield. We, I believe, we're always a year behind, meaning, so right now 2020 ended. We won't have all the 2020 data until February, and then we'll start to analyze 2020. So I believe the report on Fairfield came out sometime in 2018. It takes about 6 months to do these follow-up reports. We request lots of additional information from the department on crime, calls for service, accident, traffic volumes, patrol districts. We do a full officer level analysis where we evaluate officers so that we can know if specific officers might be driving the disparity. We meet with the department on several occasions to update them along the way as to what we're finding and to seek their input. We share with them the findings from the officer level analysis, and ultimately we share with them our full assessment. It's about a 18 to 20 page report we put together outlining our findings, and we then give the department an opportunity to respond, and then ultimately they also have an opportunity to submit a written response to be included in the report. So we met with Fairfield on a number of occasions. We went through that process. Fairfield did have an opportunity and did choose to, I don't know if you've seen the section of the report that we wrote on Fairfield. If not, I'm happy to share it with folks. It's a little wonky, but you can read the beginning and maybe the conclusions and also the response from Fairfield. The reality is, if I'm sort of summing it up a bit, Fairfield, fit a trend that we were seeing or have seen since we started this work, fairly common of predominantly white suburban communities that border more urban communities. In Fairfield's case, Bridgeport, and although Westport is to the west of Fairfield, there's also a reasonable impact because of the way Route 1 runs through Fairfield, and I-95 of Norwalk, Stanford is also impacting Fairfield as well. What we noticed in Fairfield, which again is not unique to lots of the communities we've identified that border a major urban center. By the way, Fairfield's been identified, Trumbull on the other side of Bridgeport's been identified, Hamden bordering New Haven, Wethersfield bordering Hartford, West Hartford bordering Hartford, right? If you look at the 28 or so communities identified, you'll see a theme that a lot of them border major urban centers. And when you look at the enforcement, what you notice is a couple things. You notice that enforcement, more enforcement is done the closer you get to the border of the more urban environment, right? So the closer you get to the border of Bridgeport, you see just higher levels of enforcement. There's a lot of reasons that might be the case. And the thing that I think we've always raised, that we particularly raised as an issue at the time with Fairfield, was not that there was necessarily more enforcement occurring the closer you got to the more urban environment, the more urban community, but that the nature of policing also changed pretty dramatically. So in the whiter parts of Fairfield, in the whiter neighborhoods, or even just the further you get away from Bridgeport, you saw motor vehicle enforcement largely focus on hazardous driving behavior and safety related issues. People that were speeding, blowing a stop sign, running a red light, talking on their cell phone, things that we know cause accidents. The closer you get to the border of Bridgeport, you saw higher degrees of equipment and administrative enforcement occurring. So lower level reasons for stopping cars, a tail light out, a headlight out, a license plate display issue, a window tint issue. You saw higher rates of motor vehicles being searched in those areas. You saw higher rates of consent searches, police asking more drivers as you got closer to the border if they can search their vehicle. And so that sort of leaves you to believe that, that type of enforcement is often affiliated with a sort of a crime reduction strategy, right? This idea that, we've got to, address crime, and, crime is coming into our community from Bridgeport or Norwalk or Stanford in this case in particular. What the data showed us was that, police were significantly less successful when they did search vehicles, particularly of Black and Hispanic motorists. And so we were seeing a fairly significant disparity in the rate at which they were searching motorists, in Black and Hispanic motorists in Fairfield, and the rate at which contraband was found. And we were also seeing a fairly significant, just to put in context, police in Fairfield, almost 40% of the stops of white drivers were for speeding. Okay, that's fairly high. The state average is about 25% of all stops. So, big focus on speeding, particularly in the wider areas of Fairfield. Equipment enforcement, though, registration enforcement, police running plates, was significantly, Black and Hispanic drivers were twice as likely to be stopped for a registration violation, and they were more than twice as likely to be stopped for an equipment violation when compared to white drivers. So you start to, again, just see sort of, right, the way policing changes based on either the population or the driving population of particular parts of the town.
Can I ask a clarifying question, if I may?
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt your flow, but just clarifying. It's not to say, and this is leading perhaps, it's not to say that the equipment violations didn't exist in what you've referred to as the wider areas. It's just they weren't getting stopped. Do you have that data to suggest?
Yeah, so that's another really good point. So what we found, right? So when we go in and we do these follow-ups, we've done it 28 times now. What the departments have said to us, Fairfield, I believe, similar to many others, has said to us, listen, this isn't a race issue. This is a socioeconomic issue. So it costs money to, complete some of the administrative tasks that need to be completed with operating a vehicle, paying to renew your registration or other administrative issues. And same with equipment. It costs money to get a headlight fixed or a tail light fixed. Or we have been looking at that for 7 years. And what we have found is that when police expose drivers to the same type of enforcement, violation rates are the same across racial groups. And so just to maybe make that clearer, when police look for lighting violations in white neighborhoods, they find them at the same rate as when they look for them in Black or Hispanic areas, but they don't look for them as frequently in white areas. The same is true with registration violations. We've run a number of experiments now where we've actually found that white drivers are more likely to be driving around with an unregistered vehicle than Black or Hispanic drivers, but police run plates or they place license plate readers in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods at a significantly higher rate than they do in white neighborhoods. And so what we create is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It costs money to register your vehicle. If you have less money, you'll be less likely to register your vehicle. So we go and run plates in the areas where we think people are poor. We find lots of unregistered vehicles, and then we say, see, look, we proved our point. And all of our research tells us that, again, if exposure rates are the same, meaning police look for violations at the same rate across the community, you find violation rates at a similar rate across racial groups. And so, what was ultimately driving Fairfield's disparity was their use of equipment and administrative enforcement, particularly, which was particularly disproportionately impacting Black and Hispanic motorists. And it was being done at a greater rate in and around the border of Bridgeport. So as you got closer to Bridgeport, that's where that enforcement was occurring. It wasn't occurring in Southport. It wasn't even occurring, about less than a mile into the Route 1 corridor. So, there's a lot here. Frankly, there's a lot in the report that we can unpack. I'm happy to answer questions. I will say, just because, Steve and I did talk about it, I was a little disappointed, and so I'd be a little remiss if I didn't just put it on the record for you folks to understand. The department was fairly forthcoming. They shared with us all the additional information that we requested of them. And we do request a lot of additional information so that we can make a thoughtful assessment. And so from that perspective, we were grateful. The department engaged us in a number of meaningful conversations throughout the process. They submitted to us a thoughtful response to our report, which was included in our report. That being said, I was fairly disappointed to find out only recently, although it's a number of years ago, a year and a half ago or so, that we released this report, that what the police department, the public message that ultimately the police department released to the community wasn't accurate. And frankly, if I'm speaking frank, the things that were in there in the public statement that they had released on Facebook, and likely I assume they released on their public site when asked about the report, I didn't see until recently. And I was particularly frustrated because they essentially say, we had this study done But the method for identifying us was wrong, and they used census data, and that's not good. And I think what frustrated me was just how much time we spent with the department. When I say time, I mean hours, making sure they understood that they were identified based on methods that did not use census data to make that determination. And that census, any comparison to census data was not done in the identification that got them to the point that warranted a further analysis. And so I'm always sort of open and comfortable with people, not agreeing with our conclusions or ultimately, deciding that they think there's a better way to do things. But I was a little troubled, I think is maybe the word to use, that ultimately, I think the community was left with a feeling, at least based on the way the department presented it, that, well, yeah, we got identified, but that's because those folks up at Central didn't know what they were doing because they compared who was stopped to who lives in our community. And that only bothers me because of how much time we spent with the department making sure they understood that that is not how we evaluate racial disparities, and that we did not identify them with the use of census data. And so my own little gripe, and for me, that sort of leaves me with a feeling of like, oh, we did all that work, and I thought maybe we had made some meaningful progress in it.
Well, maybe your work has not yet done, because I have a question. From your report, did you come up with a list of recommendations on how to either identify, fix areas?
We did. Well, ultimately, what we point out to them is, although, I've had lots of conversation with law enforcement and I understand sort of their trepidation in doing this, but as the evidence grows, I think it's important that they be bolder in some of the actions they take. We've resolved, as a matter of state policy, an issue for them recently. So one of the issues that they were having was disproportionately searching motorists. Particularly, they were more likely to ask through consent Black and Hispanic motorists if they could search the car, and they weren't finding much. That is not an issue that's unique to Fairfield. The state recently, in their police accountability bill, passed a law banning the use of consent searches. And so I anticipate that law took effect October 1st. Police can no longer ask motorists if they'd like to have their car searched. They can search a vehicle if they build probable cause. Something's in plain view, right? There's a gun on the floor of the car, for example. They would be able to search the vehicle, but they can't simply ask people. So to some degree, that's been resolved. That was something we pointed out. And the other thing we pointed out was that they really needed to reevaluate their use of equipment in administrative offenses, and that they needed to ensure that they were being applied in a thoughtful and fair manner throughout the community. And that, what we know is that there are little to no racial disparities when police use the motor vehicle laws to stop cars for hazardous moving behaviors. And, as long that they really need to move to make that more of a primary reason for stopping vehicles and less, of the low level equipment and administrative offenses. And so, we've had some communities where chiefs have ultimately told their people, listen, I understand that you can stop a car for a taillight out, but it's not the priority. Somebody drives around with no headlights on, yeah, stop them. But, there's at the end of the day, what you have to understand about the motor vehicle code is there are hundreds, if not there's thousands of motor vehicle statutes. It is impossible for an individual to get behind the wheel of their car and not violate the motor vehicle statutes within 60 seconds of being on the roadway. And for most people, they violate a motor vehicle statute before they even turn the car on. I don't know how many people on this call have some sort of a frame around their license plate. Maybe it talks about where you bought the car, right? Fairfield Honda, or maybe it's the college you went to, or maybe it's the some sports team you like. That's a technical violation of the law. And you might say, well, that's kind of silly. Well, there were 15,000 people last year stopped because part of the word Connecticut was blocked on their license plate from that frame. Although everybody knows it's a Connecticut plate and the letters are clearly legible. But I just say all that to say that, I sort of reject the idea that that you know, when we talk about differences in violation rates, I've sort of always rejected that idea because we know that, you know, it is just so easy to violate motor vehicle laws, and police are given a lot of discretion in this area. And I think if we start to see that police are disproportionately using that discretion and it's impacting one group of people over another, then the department has an obligation not to fall back where they tend to fall back on, which is what I hear time and time again from law enforcement is, well, those are still legal reasons to stop cars. And I don't dispute that. Of course, it's a legal reason. But the question is, why are you only applying that law to Black drivers and not to white drivers as well?
So Ken, this is, I think we would all, I'm speaking for the group, especially on the chat on the side, which is saying that in the light of the fact that we're on the eve of hiring a new police chief here, I think it would be very important for us all to read the report to get a better understanding and compare that for our own sense of, you know, understanding and education. One, why the discrepancy of what they were reporting. It'd be interesting to kind of leverage that, but to really understand it. I would love to be able to, and thank you so much for that presentation, and Steve for all the thorough work you did in advance of this. I'd love to, I was going to say, I'd love to turn it over to the group to ask questions if we'd be open, if you'd be open to that, Ken. But Steve, did you have something to say?
Yeah, just real quick, because Ken's point, I don't know if it sunk in, but the statement that the police department gave to Ken to add to the report, to their overall report, is completely different than the statement that they made to the public. And it's concerning because either they didn't understand, well, they had to have understood because they gave two different answers.
Yeah.
So why would you give two different answers?
And I think before we, you know, this is in the spirit of like openness, before we assign intention as a group, and Ken, you know, respectfully, like, because we haven't read this report and Steve, you've read that, the discrepancy, I think we'd all like to unpack why. And that is an opportunity to kind of say, hey, you know, what do you have to say for this? And to you know, put people's feet to the fire, if not for any other reason, so that we can better understand why that discrepancy. Ken, are you open to us asking you some questions if the group has a couple questions, and we'll try to keep it to just a few minutes. You know, Doug and anyone else have their hand up? Doug first, and then we'll.
Ken, I just fascinating work, and thank you for all the detail. It's really incredible and sobering, to say the least. But when you're actually presenting the results to a department in Fairfield or anywhere else, who's actually in the room with you?
So we bring in just our small team of researchers. It's usually me and two other researchers, and we, you know, so the way our process works, we identify departments through our first screening. We present our findings, our draft findings, to our advisory board at a public meeting, so that, you know, who we're working with isn't like secret, but we don't release a report at that time. We then go meet with the department. I usually communicate directly with the chief and tell him he's welcome to invite whoever he thinks is appropriate from the local community and from the department to be at the table. It's oftentimes just the police administrators and occasionally, you know, like the local elected, either a town manager or first select person, maybe a town lawyer is in the room. But usually those meetings are, you know, I'm trying to think, in Fairfield, I think it was the command staff. So I think there was a handful in the room, but it was all from law enforcement, the chief. I don't know if they have a deputy chief, captain, you know, but there were no members of, say, the public, if that's, you know, what you're getting at. And what we try and do is when we finish the process, we then make a public report and a public presentation back to our advisory board at the state capitol, and we release it in a press release. And what we offer to every department is we offer to come to their community and present our findings, if they so wish, to the town council, to the first select person, and we've done that when asked. So we make the offer, we leave it to the department, and to the local community, to the local community, but it's usually, the relationship has mostly been developed with the department. And we're always happy to come and share sort of what we've found.
So if we as a group were to say, ask you to come and do a community meeting, is that something that ever happens?
We host about, pre-COVID, we were hosting 8 to 10 community forums a year. We were trying to do them more regionally. And so we were in the last area, we were in Bridgeport, I think was the last in that region. And we try and invite the region where we have a discussion about racial profiling in the region. We share a brief presentation on any departments or towns that were identified in recent years. And then we have about an hour-long moderated discussion with folks about racial profiling in the project. And so we're open to that. We do it all the time. We're happy to do it in this virtual environment as well. Like I said, it's usually been regional, but it doesn't mean that a specific community like Fairfield can't say, well, we just want to focus on Fairfield. I've done that in a few communities. They've come and said, no, we just want to talk about our town. We don't. And so can you come and do that? And we're happy to do it.
And two questions. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, there's a question in the chat, and I think it kind of, Michelle asks, and I also am thinking about, this to me does sound, what you're talking about is sort of this extension of broken windows policing that we have been doing and we know is not actually as effective as people think it is. So, but police forces obviously do think it's effective because it's why it's been going on for so long. So is there friction when you do it? I think her question is, sharing data causes public friction with police versus movement toward positive change. Has there been instances where the dialogue is more productive? So I guess, and that was my question too, because this is, in some communities, this is going to be a tremendous paradigm shift for the forces, which have believed that, and I don't know if everyone's familiar with the term broken windows policing. Maybe you could explain it better than I can. I know what it is, but I'm not sure I can explain it as well as you can. But, you're kind of dealing with some of those underlying unexamined views that actually have led toward the inequity that we feel. So can you talk to us a little bit about a time when it went well and people actually followed your recommendations?
Hamden is sort of our example that we hold up and say, this is what every department's response should be. Hamden had a lot of the same issues as Fairfield. They bordered New Haven. There was a lot of border patrol, right? The type of enforcement they did, the closer you got to the border, New Haven, it's this low level equipment, administrative offenses, searching lots of cars, particularly in the Black. There's one neighborhood that has a much higher Black population than other parts of Hamden, and it also happens to border New Haven. And so, we went in and we pointed out a lot of the same things we pointed out in Fairfield, and we said, this is driving your disparity. And the chief at the time took a lot of flack. He's no longer there, and he said to us, I'm going to direct my people to no longer stop cars for anything that isn't a serious, hazardous moving violation. I want them, they're not going to stop cars anymore for window tints or, one tail light being out or one brake light being out, or, I want them to focus on hazardous driving behaviors. And I'm going to tell them they can no longer ask people to search their cars. They build probable cause, they can search the car. If they don't have probable cause, stop it. Now, this is before any of this was popular. It's back in 2015. He said to us at the time, he goes, I think crime's going to go up. He goes, but I'm willing to try it. He goes, and when crime goes up, I'm going to just basically come back to you and say, see, this is why we need this type of policing. So we said, all right, well, let's see what happens. So we ran the experiment for, I don't know, six, 8 months. We collected lots of data, and to cut to the chase, ultimately, I think we weren't surprised. I think they were surprised to realize crime dropped 5%, accidents were down 15%, the racial disparity had disappeared, and the rate at which they were being successful in searching cars went from less than 10% of the time were they finding contraband when they searched cars to more than 70% of the time. Now, they searched far fewer cars, but they were searching the right cars. Okay. And what it told us was that police presence in high crime areas is what has the biggest impact on crime reduction, not what they do once they're there. So simply having, 2 cops in a high crime area instead of 1 is what's going to have the biggest impact on crime. So the question is, okay, if we know we have to have 2 cops in this neighborhood, do we need them stopping cars for these low-level reasons, which, by the way, leave Black and Hispanic drivers feeling a certain way? They know what it is, right? This is not new. This is all it's a Operation Pipeline back in the 80s and 90s is how we got here. It was a federal program that went in and trained local police departments, said the way we win the war on drugs is you manipulate your motor vehicle code, you stop cars for bullshit reasons, you search the cars, and that's how you get the drugs off the streets. It doesn't work. The data tells us you don't find the drugs, and so, but that doesn't mean if 50% of your 911 calls are coming from one neighborhood that you don't place more resources there, right? But it does mean that the approach they take in that neighborhood doesn't have to be sort of this broken windows. We have to have a big presence. We go in, we stop lots of people, we get lots of drugs off the street. You just don't find it. It's not effective. Fairfield, Hamden learned that, right? I've got an example in Waterbury, same thing. They were only running plates and they were placing their license plate readers in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. And then they were saying, well, it's because they're poor and they're less likely to be able to afford registration. Okay, but have you ever exposed the white community to the same type of enforcement to know if it's effective? And they said, well, no. Okay, well, we're going to place a license plate reader in a predominantly white neighborhood in Waterbury, and we're going to run it for, 3 months, and we're going to see how many unregistered cars we get. We have 7% more unregistered vehicles in the white neighborhood than we did in the Hispanic neighborhood. And it's the same thing. It's sort of like this, it's poverty that drives this. No, the data tells a different story. I don't know. The question is, there was a question, by the way, the relationship between us and law enforcement, I would say, was fairly contentious until maybe 2 years ago. We finally started having a breakthrough where, and I think a lot of this came because there was a shift in the national conversation, and police kind of realized yeah, okay, maybe we'll deal with these guys finally. The first 3 years of us putting out reports, we put out a report and the police association would just put out a scathing rebuttal, right? They don't know what they're talking about. Racial disparities don't exist. We don't engage in profiling, which, by the way, we never said profiling. We talk about disparities in a very scientific way. And so the conversations have been hard. Every time I go down to sit across the table from a police chief, that first meeting is 2 hours. And it's usually uncomfortable because it's a lot of sort of educating, we don't think that you accounted for X. No, we did. Let me tell you how we did. We think our Black population has grown since the last census, and we don't think that you've calculated that fairly. Okay, well, the methodology you were identified with didn't rely on census data, and let me help you understand. Usually by the time we leave that first meeting, of the 28 police departments I've worked with, I can honestly say that the meetings were constructive. Doesn't mean that they adopted our conclusions or changed their approach, but they were at least willing to listen and engage. They were productive in 27 of 28, with 27 of 28 departments. And the one where it wasn't constructive wasn't Fairfield, it was another municipality. So I don't know. The question for me is, would the conversation and the outcome in Fairfield, had they been identified and this report was done today as opposed to a year and a half ago, would the conversation be different? I think it would be, because the national dynamic has shifted. And they probably couldn't get away with the public statement that they put out, a year and a half ago if they put it out today. I think most people would view it as tone deaf.
Are there any examples of where you had sort of a civilian, not even sort of, town government, but a civilian sort of partner in presenting this stuff to the police departments?
Yeah,
I know it risks the relationship, and I understand that downside, but it's almost like if someone for instance, from this group sat in a meeting like that, would it be less deniable?
Westport and Norwich are the two that come to mind. Westport actually hasn't been identified by our metrics, but there's a very active group down there that's engaged with the police department on these issues. And about 2 years ago, they really wanted to peel back the onion on the data in Westport. They wanted to have a conversation with the police chief and with the command staff. And so that was a fruitful conversation that we had that was led by the community. They coordinated, we came down, we presented it. I don't know that the conversation would have gone the same way had it just been us. And in Norwich, the same thing. Norwich was identified, and it just so happened that a member of our advisory board lives in Norwich and takes a big interest. And so, she was obviously, aware of our work and wanted to be at the table, and asked if other, members of the community could be at the table. And ultimately the department agreed. And so when we had our meetings in Norwich, they were there at the table. And you're right, it did change the dynamic. It didn't allow it to be sort of, what sometimes it turns into, which is us saying, hey, we've identified some disparities and we want to drill down and figure out what's going on. And then we spend 2 hours of them trying to tell us why we don't know what we're talking about. So yeah, the community likely would help. And that's probably partially on us, right? For not having found a way to incorporate that in a more meaningful way.
So Ryan and I asked a similar question, given that the data is now a year old and there's been some, national movement, global movement, is the data still relevant? Would you imagine that it would be more of, sort of proof of concept or change dramatically?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember seeing significant shifts in Fairfield's data from 17 to 18 to 19. There were some, but marginal. And 2020 is a big outlier year. So the thing is, 2020 has COVID. So, traffic enforcement just plummeted in March, April, May, and it's remained at a fairly suppressed level. And then we had Eric Garner, or rather George Floyd, I'm sorry, which, caused sort of almost a bit of like a work stoppage. I don't know if that's impacted Fairfield, but we've definitely seen sort of, the remnants of that, having police be a little bit more reserved about stopping motor vehicles.
And I also think with the new legislation, I think that there's been kind of a shift in it. What I would love to propose as a next step, because clearly, Ken, you have so much incredible information here. And Steve, again, thank you for this amazing introduction. And it sounds like we have to sort of continue and figure out how we can incorporate so much of what we're learning here. I would love to suggest that a next step is, Ken, Steve, maybe through you, if Ken, you would share that report, if there's any other sort of pertinent data that you have that you can share, or the findings report, or your summary of it, or if the recommendations, just to get the group started, because I think that we're going to need to process and revisit. And again, we could spend hours and hours and hours and keep going. I'm just aware of the time. And so unless anyone has parents having internet issues. Yeah.
Just real quick, my conversations with the chief, he said exactly what you said. We're not pulling over people for minor traffic violations. We're not looking through anybody's car. That's my mandate. That's what he said. So.
And that would be, and that would be new.
Right.
I would agree. I think that would be good. And so the question is, if that's a policy decision that's been made by the department, we should be able to see that in the data. We want to make sure that that's true. And we would also, can then measure, the impact that it's had, in terms of their overall racial disparity. And I think the other thing to ensure is that, that's not just, that policy can very easily change under new leadership, right? And so we saw that happen in Hamden a bit. The chief that was really sort of progressive and said, none of this, you saw that type of enforcement disappear. Well, new chief came in and believed in, a different policing philosophy, and you saw some of that come back. You saw their disparity grow again. That's only been in the last 12 months. So I think that's good for the chief. I think, the data told us they could have done it sooner, but better late than sorry, right?
Also, when he wrote the statement, the response that I got initially was the one that was the public response, which is, well, there's a reason why it's disproportionate because we're next to Bridgeport. And that was what I heard in June. You heard something different recently, but I think that kind of more speaks to what you were saying, which is that, we have to make sure that we memorialize this, that this is not something that will live on beyond this current chief. And, I think that this is something that when we're kind of conceptualizing what we as a group can do, this is a very task-oriented thing that this group could do.
There are also,
especially because if it's codified, it's one thing if it's like Chief Liddy feels this way, so that's kind of the thing. But if it's codified, that's different, which is why, we give them every opportunity not to have to be defensive, and so we approach it from the place of we assume it's going to be better practices. Now, is it codified? And if not, here are opportunities. But Steve, you were going to say something, but I do really hope that we can then move on. But
No,
so
I
go ahead.
agree.
And
My question is, is it in writing anywhere, or is it just the daily, every day that you say, okay, this is what we're going to do?
That's why I think it's important to give them the opportunity to say, no, we've responded, it's codified, not codified. And again, then that becomes something, as Gina just said, that is task oriented, that we make as a list of recommendations. It therefore becomes important too, going back to what many of you said, it gives us leverage and why we need to be having these conversations sooner than later. So,
I mean, at the very least, I think, advising the hiring practice of this should be a discussion that is part of the interview process, right? Like, this is data about this town, and someone who wants to be a police chief in this town should talk about how they plan to respond to that. And I think that is something that is probably critical for us to make sure that we put forward, that we make sure that the discussion of the data, or we highly recommend, and we make sure that, and I would say that we publicly recommend that the discussion of the data be part of the hiring practice of the new police chief, because we want to get that person on record about what they feel about this policy, because ultimately this is, the challenge of our work, is that most people don't think of this as racism, but the people who get stopped definitely think it is. And that's the division here. And so when you have people who are not stopped this way, they can say their own view of it, but people who have been stopped will have a different view, and that's our mission.
So
one of the things that Ryan asked, or Michelle, someone asked, can we get the 2018 and 2019 data as well? Do you have that?
Yep, so I will send you not only the report, and I'll identify the chapter in the report in Fairfield, because the report's like 400 pages long. You probably don't want to read the whole thing. And I will also send the link to where you can get the data is available publicly on the internet right through 2019. We'll upload 2020 in a couple months. So, and you can actually, the data will summarize, there's a whole web page. You can click on Fairfield and look at Fairfield, and lots of data from Fairfield, and you can pick the year and the dates, and you can download data for Fairfield. So I'll send you all the link if you're interested.
Based on the timing, after I speak and get a better understanding of the police commission's timing and their process, we may have to have a special meeting in case there's any voting item in terms of action we decide we want to take, because while many of us, it seems, are marching in the same direction, we are a body of 11 and need to make sure that we vote and everybody is at least majority on the same page of any action we might take. So what I will do is have that phone call again, share some of what I find in terms of timing, and then if it's warranted, call a special meeting. Otherwise, this will be kind of top of agenda for next time if we do have some time. Ken, thank you so much. And to be continued, unfortunately for you, maybe. I hope that we weren't too scary for you, but
no problem.
You're sucked in now. We've got you now.
Anything I can do, Steve has my contact information. I'm happy to to help where I can. These are important conversations, and I'm always happy to engage local folks. So I'm gonna pop off, but Steve has my information.
Thank you.
I'll share information with folks. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. This is such a wonderful example of ways in which we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but through Steve's like incredible sort of research and going after his findings and scratching, we have an opportunity here, which kind of leads us to our next, one of the next agenda items, which is about incorporating the school report. And I won't jump ahead, but there's an opportunity there, and they're presenting to the Board of Ed tonight, tomorrow night, I can't remember, that plan we heard the last time from Lenasia. And there's really amazing work being done. And so we just have to figure out how to incorporate it in the best way, which also kind of segues into our next item, which is to hear, consider, and act on next steps. So Karen, I don't know if you're still having internet issues. Sandra, if you kind of want to weigh in on what your process was in terms of collecting all the information, hopefully we can hear from Karen.
I'm still here. I just, my video, my screen,
okay.
It just kept freezing. So I shut off my video to conserve bandwidth, because I don't know if that's a thing, but it feels like a thing.
So Sandra, if you have anything to, it would be great to hear from you in terms of what you were able to do, and then pass it to Karen and talk about any of what you found,
Well, we basically just collected everything, and we weren't sure, Karen and I talked, we weren't exactly sure what our charge was. So what we've done is we've just sort of organized it. I've got a few last minute interviews, and we still really need to synthesize it thoughtfully. So and we wanted to do that with Doug and Ryan. So the four of us were going to go through it. So we all have access to the anonymous interviews, and we're planning to go through all of that for the next meeting and come back with, these are the common threads. This is the stuff that we should be looking at. These are the things that we need to be addressing. Karen, did I leave anything out?
No, I mean, the work has started. I think that the key things were delayed because some of the interview notes are still trickling in. So I hope at this point we have all of them, because it's hard to finish the project when we don't have them all in. But we've started a summary. We just need to all get eyes on all of the interviews at this point, and then polish what we have to share out with the group. So
Karen.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Sonia. I just want to make sure, did you get my my interview notes?
Yeah, I think we got that today, right, Alex? Isn't that what you said? Yeah.
Yep, I sent that over.
Yep, I got that.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so it's a perfect example of one that I haven't read yet, because they weren't in there when I was reviewing the information. So, and then we just got, this is just the full disclosure, we just got Doug and Ryan into the shared file, in the last day, because we were in the holiday fog. So, anyway, so they haven't really had a chance to roll their sleeves up to look into it too. But we've started the summary and taken it kind of to this point. And I think that, we're ready to rock and roll, and, they'll kind of roll their sleeves up and take a look too.
So because, I'm somebody who loves homework, other than looking at, I don't love homework, but I love homework for this group. Other than looking at the definitions and the media list and reviewing the website, is there work for the group at large, an assignment that sort of can help us keep
I think the big assignment that is coming up, so if you figure, okay, let us do what we're going to do, and the next meeting we can present out what we learned. But the big assignment that's coming up is survey questions. Somebody in this group can be concurrently starting to, look at the other surveys that have been out there. Like we want to launch a survey. Somebody's got to be starting to draft that. What are those survey questions? What survey questions worked really well on some of the other research initiatives. Like, I don't know where that is. That's not a part of what we did, but that should be happening concurrently.
Isn't it informed, however, by what you learned somewhat, so that we were responding direct? Okay, so, but it could be separate and apart from
Well,
that.
it could be, now we have a draft survey instrument. Let's look at that survey instrument with the lens of what we've learned in these interviews. You know, the question that we asked in these interviews is often, you know, and we have a few things coming out of it, but you know, what should we be asking? But a lot of the interviewees are like, I don't know. So, you know, so while we have sort of great learning and some neat recommendations coming in, it's not going to be comprehensive of the survey instrument.
Yep.
So people were chomping at the bit.
Can I suggest?
Because I also
Can I suggest kind of like, on the one hand, circling back to what Doug and Steve did before, which is like, don't reinvent the wheel. Let's figure out what's already been done. Maybe go back to, they found a list of towns who were doing things. Maybe we can take a look at those towns to see if they sent out any surveys and start there. Because that might be the shortest route, right? Because we might find something that we already like and then just have to modify based on what you found.
And piggybacking on that, we know that, for instance, from Lanasia's presentation, that they did a survey and had findings. Could someone take the two and what Ken just presented? So there's two opportunities here. Is someone willing, or two someone's willing to look at Ken's report and pull a few questions that might be part of a survey from those findings? You know, and they can be leading questions based on what we've learned. And is someone willing to look at the education survey that Lanasia did, and pull out questions that might be relevant based on their findings? Like, and I'm making this up, but like, does racial inequity exist in the schools? You know, and that we know from the findings in the school that yes, it does, but then that's maybe one question that someone could come up with. And then additionally, there's the third piece, which is what other towns have done in surveys. So it's the local education one, it's the police stop at the Ken's presentation, and then it's what other towns have done. So there's three opportunities for question gathering.
Yeah, and I apologize because I think I was going to follow up with Lanasia and it fell off my radar completely to follow up with her and get that survey instrument. Gina, do you have it by any chance, or did you just see it?
Yeah, I can get it.
Okay.
Great.
You saw the survey that you did this one? You saw the survey that you sent?
All right. So
and I just want to I want to clarify something vocally. Steve, you're asking me a question in here and I'm afraid it's going to distract me too much if I'm trying to follow your thread. We're reviewing what we're reviewing, and by me I mean Sandra compiled all of the notes that people took in the listening interviews, right? So people took notes, they gave it to Sandra. She's compiled it into a Google Drive that's not shared beyond just a small group of us because it's not a public sharing at this point, and lots of them still have names on them. So it's not going to be, those individual notes are not going to be shared with the whole group. What we are working on is, so we're looking at notes and we're working on a summary, and that summary will be shared with our entire group and made public, absent from names. So I hope that clarifies what I think you're asking me in the chat. It's just, I can't type all that.
And then the summary will be data points in addition to the survey findings, correct?
Yeah, it's going to be insights from the interviews. It's going to be questions, you know, it's going to be some ideas for the blueprints because we got a few of those, and it's going to be questions, question areas for the survey.
And then, you know, again, I think in terms of next steps, which is not exactly connected to deep listening, but I think we kind of have this new opportunity here that is time sensitive. I think we do have to give some thought to, you know, what are the questions that we're going to be asking of directly to the people who are doing the police hiring, right? Like this is an opportunity for that as well.
I'm going to talk tomorrow. And again, that may be where we need a special meeting to have a voting item based on what they tell us in terms of timing. So who is interested from the group?
But I think in terms of drafting that, so that when we have the meeting, we have something that we can be working off of. I'm happy to do the education one. I can work with someone on the police one, but it's so outside of like what I do really. But I'm happy to if someone wants
Okay.
to partner with me on that.
So since you're getting the instrument from Lanesia anyway, it would be great then
Yeah.
if you take that on. And Alex, were you about to say something? So
No, I was
oh,
just
Ryan.
saying for clarification, what you were referring to. Yeah, so
I think, you know,
educational, but are you asking if someone wants to
so in
start
terms of time, right?
for the interview process of the chief?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a separate thing that we should be looking at. You know, that's what I was saying. Like, I thought we would have more time for this, but this is rather time sensitive. You know, they're starting the process soon, and I think I wouldn't want too far to go without saying something. And so I think we should be working on simultaneously to the other things we're working at. Just how whatever we're going to bring back to vote on next week, to maybe come with a draft of it. So kind of synthesize what Ken said to us and start putting some thoughts around what we as a body are how we're going to stick our nose into this process, essentially. And now that we have this document that Ken is sending us, that's a really good thing for us to base it on, because we've got data that has already been analyzed and discussed, which makes it even better, right? Because what the students did hasn't actually been processed as a community yet, whereas this report has been processed thoroughly 3 years ago. So Jamie's in the police accountability subgroup. That's awesome. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking, is that maybe just in the interim between now and when you come back with your information, Nancy, to have just a document that we can all work off of, so that we will have something to vote on the next time we're together.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm happy to, I'm in a police county. Okay, sorry. Okay, so Jamie, great. Education taken care of. Now that just leaves sort of like the town. Doug, are you kind of, since you had dived into that a little bit, are you willing to look at some of what other towns and, survey best practices are?
I can certainly go back and look at that. I think a lot of the survey stuff Steve and I reviewed was actually about surveying sort of town employees or government employees, less of a community survey. But that's my recollection, but let me dive into it and sort of check that out.
It's still important. I mean, that might be in terms of just developing something. Maybe it will just have we'll have a town employee on.
Yeah,
So.
no, clearly that's one subset of this. The overall sample would be that some population of government employees. So
and a few people should be doing what other town, because what you research will be different. Like, I'm happy to do some of my own research and offer questions. What we need though is somebody who's willing to collect these questions, just to kind of keep a list. Or maybe because I don't think we can do a shared Google Doc on this since we don't want it public, but just someone who's willing to just literally track, this is my list of suggestions, so that when we're ready to, whoever is then willing to like hone the survey can take that list that someone's keeping, being the keeper of the questions, will then take that and then can shape it. Does someone want to be the keeper of those questions?
Should I be the keeper of the questions since I'm the keeper of the interviews?
You read my mind, you good woman. You read my mind. All right. So as those questions come up, Gina and Doug and Jamie and I will certainly do my own research, and you don't have to step up now and speak out. But if you find in your travels that you have some questions that might be good, send them to Sandra, who will not edit. She'll just dump them into a Google Doc, so that when when it's time to draft this survey, the people who are more skilled at this than I will look at this massive list that Sandra will keep. Thank you, Sandra.
And just to reassure you from a process standpoint, Nancy, there's two types of thinking when it comes to that type of project. There's the divergent thinking that has to be done, where we're casting a wide net and we're gathering all the questions, and then we converge and we choose them, right? Then we say, okay, let's be a little bit more decisive and choose the questions, because we're not asking the laundry list of questions. And that's when we can not only choose the right ones, but we can fix the semantics and all that. So, Sandra, you may be getting a huge list, and I don't think anybody should worry that we're going to have a 25-page survey going out to people. That's not what we're going to be doing, but because some of the questions might be similar and we want to look at the wording of them and all that. So
I'll try to organize them too, when I do get them out, I'll try to group them.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm going to actually make a motion to table the action, because it says here to hear, consider, and act on how we can integrate the Fairfield Equity Coalition schools report. I'm going to move to table that action because we're just not there yet. I think I put it there as kind of a dump and a reminder that we need to incorporate it. So I move to table to a date uncertain how we can integrate the Fairfield Equity Coalition schools report into our work on the task force. Is there a second? Gina will second it. Any discussion? I think we've just had that discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jason, great.
Karen Lynch, can I ask you a question? I remember.
Well, let me just say, is this a discussion point, or should I just close out the vote?
Close out the vote.
Okay, Sonia, are you in favor?
I'm in favor.
Okay, so unanimous pass. Or Alex, you too? Okay, Sandra, great. So all in favor, any no's, any abstentions? Great. So the motion passes. We'll table it. Sorry, Gina.
Karen, do I remember that? Did you teach me about the parking lot? Is that you? That you can have like a place where you sort of park things for later.
And probably in some of the sessions that I facilitated for you. Yes, we always if we were doing if we were in a meeting and we were live in person, I'd have a flip chart up and I'd stick a Post-it note, or I'd put a title on it that says a parking lot, and people would write on a Post-it note whatever topic they want to talk about some other time.
I don't want to forget some of these things, so I'm wondering if we can kind of in our agendas have like an area where we're keeping track of these things, because I want to make sure
I will add it.
That we come back to it, so that every agenda may on
and
the
yes,
bottom
and I'll
have
be the keeper of that.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's a metaphorical parking lot for.
Oh, you're breaking up.
Not ready to talk. Yeah, my internet. Forget
or is it me?
It's a metaphorical parking lot for things you're not ready to talk about.
Right.
All right, I'm having connect. So I will add agenda items. Like, I love the idea of calling it the parking lot, where we ask each week kind of like, oh, hey, this is for the parking lot. And then we can kind of keep a running list. And as the keeper of the agendas, I'll make sure they get and who it's assigned to, so that we can make sure we're revisiting it if we need to. Ooh, my head is spinning. Okay, Jamie had emailed about some, and maybe that was the suggested forum in the chat, but was there something else you wanted to bring up, Jamie, about upcoming events?
It was mostly that discussion with the police chief.
And you are on mute.
And there was also the Martin Luther King event. I just put a link for that. It was those two things.
Okay, great. Is
the link in the Martin Luther King event in the link?
It was in an email I sent to the group, and I didn't know how to copy and paste into the chat, but Michelle McCabe, I sent an email to her and she put the link to register for the police chief discussion.
So moving forward, in the interest of transparency, if anyone has the best way to do this, and I have two things to follow up with, which is the equity, inequity, or equality, equity language. But in the future, if anyone has this kind of thing where they want to send a link to, we'll have another place on the agenda where it's like upcoming events. If you can get them to me in advance, again, more than 24 hours, obviously, so we have time, then I can post them in the agenda as like areas of interest. So that's one way of informing people of upcoming events. And we'll put that each week as like a way of showing what's what. Karen is asking me about events so we can show our representation to the group. I think, we're still trying to figure that out, and maybe by putting the events on the agenda, it's a way in advance for us to have the discussion at the meeting, because there is really no mechanism for us to do it except for if it's listed on the agenda. We talk about it at our meeting and then we assign. And obviously for things that are very last second, I don't know how to account for that. But if you email me, anyone that hears of something, again, we put it on the agenda as like calendar events. That's going to be the best way until we figure out through the website the best way to.
So this event that's on the 12th happens before the next time we meet, and is somebody definitely going to it from our group?
I'm going to it.
Okay.
And so if it were on the agenda as a specific item, again, as an upcoming event, we would be able to publicly say, and then we know that there's representation. So for now, it was advised to me that that's like the easiest.
Right. And I think Amy did that template for attending to, you know, like, I think that we have that template in place for, hey, when you go to an event, kind of, you know, if you want to share out, you can use this template, I think. Isn't that what happened? Amy, maybe you can expand on that, but I feel like you put together a template for that kind of thing. So was that Steve saying you were going?
Yeah. Yes.
Steve, you can take a look at it, who was present, who was presiding, and the, you know, all those, the things that we would need, the number of people, and then at the end, you know, the synopsis, a little bit of that, and then your reflection.
And so maybe, Ryan, that template becomes under our forms documents on the website, something that we can vote on next time as an official use, so that when people go to events, so that like Steve, he would fill that out. It becomes something on the agenda that, you know, becomes backup.
Yeah, and maybe the agenda item, maybe there's a standing light item there that's, you know, events attended since the last meeting and events coming up next week. So we always hear the recap from the person who went and we get into a cadence there. Could be kind of neat.
Perfect. So Annie, if you could forward me that template, just so I have it at the top of email, I'll send that, or send it to Ryan and Alex, because when we're putting together the agenda next time with the media list, with the definition list, with the disclaimer, we'll put that template, because then we can throw that up so that, see, like anyone that's attending something, they know, oh, I just download that form, I grab it off our website, and then you submit it as part of the backup for the meeting. So that's a great suggestion, Karen. So I briefly emailed with Attorney Baldwin about the language, and hard to know if he was actually pushing back or just not having an answer yet, but I think he was running it by the Board of Selectmen just to see if it's simple as it looked like a typo, or if there's something further. I will follow up again tomorrow because I haven't heard and it's been a day, but hopefully it's like a non-event.
What was the word he called it? What was that term that he used for it?
Yeah, like a syntax error or something.
No, it was a strange term I'd never heard before.
So hopefully that is just, because I did say it was important to this group. It was important clarity. But hopefully I just wanted to circle back and let you know that, you know, that is something that we're just waiting to hear back on. And then if, by the way, if we do have to go before the board and make an official presentation, it's just one opportunity where a member or two of this group will just have a chance, and it puts us publicly on the record. So, you know, either way, you know, we'll do what we need to do. Any other items of new business, any comments, any questions, any? Yes.
I had a little bit of context. We touched upon it during today's conversation, but there was never like the perfect time to go in. So what my deep listening was with the HR director. Great guy. Interestingly enough, I think everyone should know a couple of things that he told me. First, he's pretty new in role, came on board in November. Second, he has done a similar job for both urban centers like Bridgeport and Waterbury, but also other suburbs like Trumbull. Third, he said, very different from all of his other roles, he plays zero part in hiring for firefighters or police. So that was very interesting. There's, you know, obviously his opinions, which I won't share here, but the facts were that only a month ago did they start accepting online applications. So he felt very happy that there was a task force that not only was talking about these things that he's been through, been a part of in some of his previous roles, but also, you know, having perhaps some recommendations in our blueprint regarding how to improve hiring and recruiting. He was all for. So I just wanted to share a little bit of that information just to give you a little context about what he has walked into as a new enroll HR director for the town.
So who hires the police and fire?
The commissions, the police commission and the fire commission. And those are appointed by the first select woman and the board of selectmen.
For how long is the term of the commission?
I think 5 and 6 years. It's on the town website. But again, you know, it's hard to separate. Yeah, sorry. It's without getting too sort of controversial here. It's where you know, politics, elections have consequences, and this is why you need to make sure, regardless of your political affiliation, that the people that we elect to serve, you know, understand the role that, because the tentacles go deep, you know, like they are responsible for placing a lot of these commissioners.
Nancy, what's
Also,
the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that, you know, one of the things that we will have to really think about as a group when we talk about this is what are the consequences of that? And again, I'm not speaking politically. I'm speaking about, is that the best mechanism for a town to be equal?
Right. That's why,
you know, to be equitable when you have 5 people who have very similar backgrounds making the decisions about the entire police force.
Well, and that was my
why
question,
we can take it
Nancy.
away
I don't
from
know.
politics. Sorry,
Right.
Sonia.
No, that's fine. So does the community get involved in the selection process at all?
No.
There's no public hearings or anything?
I don't believe so, but I haven't, you know, again, I'm going to get more educated tomorrow after I can circle back to the group. I haven't been through that process.
The only reason I'm asking about that is, you know, my husband just recently went through the chief of police for another city, and it was pretty rigorous. And basically, there were several town or city meetings where the public attended and actually interviewed each of the candidates, the final candidates. And I think there's a tremendous amount of value in that in terms of transparency, as well as engagement with the community. And the decision wasn't made by a commission. It was the decision was made up by I think the mayor had the final call on it, but to have 4 different, what I would call town hall meetings where over 100 people attended and questioned the candidates, I think was pretty amazing. So I just want to throw that out there in terms of where we want to go in terms of transparency and engagement.
Well, and it brings up amazing points because where the opportunity is there is going to be, and Michelle's asking about how the charter gets amended. The first select woman, one of her interests is putting together a charter review committee to really look at the charter. But I think it's another opportunity for a representative, a liaison to the charter revision committee to be looking through the lens of racial equity and justice on some of these very issues, because it is in the charter, it's per the charter about the police commission and the fire commission. And so while you may not be able to change it from the commission side or the political side, the way to change it is literally codifying it and changing it in the charter. and around that. So it's a
Do you
deep
know when that
opportunity, but it's
process
a bigger
starts,
one.
Nancy?
She hasn't
Do you know
even,
when that process starts?
no, I mean, I think it's something that she talked about when she was running, and then subsequently, I know it's been kind of an ongoing discussion. But I do think we have an opportunity at some point, probably pretty soon, to just send a letter, a public letter saying that when that process happens, we'd like to be we'd like there to be representation. So that is a sidebar thing. And I think maybe we put that on a agenda pretty soon, because we don't want that train to leave the station and not be part of it, or at least ask the question to be a part of it.
Let's get that.
I think that Brenda said that wasn't done since 1984 was the last time that they looked at it.
Right.
The other,
It's long overdue.
Does anybody find like the town seal is offensive? Does anybody look at that and just stand out? I mean, I look at it, it's like, I mean,
It's
right?
a mess.
We were talking about that when we were looking at our website, because they just automatically put the seal up there. And so we were suggesting that I think we talked about that last time, that we develop a logo and get the seal off of our section.
In fact, thank you for reminding me of that. I sort of nudged my daughter over a break to try to come up with some drafts of logo ideas, but I think we'll put it on the agenda to put it out there, and as just something to put in all of your heads. If you have graphic designer friends who might be interested in doing something for us.
Yeah, and I mean, we can also, I don't know, Gina, if you're going to talk to Lanesia, I'm sure, it would be another great thing for awards or for a high school student to do for us. I just love the idea of engaging students, your daughter, anybody, I feel like.
Yep. She can bring it to her graphics department too.
Yeah, they have such good graphics departments, certainly at Ward, probably at Ludlow.
Yeah. So.
Be a great idea for a contest.
Yeah, totally. In fact, a great Fairfield Equity Coalition driven project.
Contest, is that what you just said, Gina? A contest? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, a contest.
Do you want to,
yeah. Right?
when you're talking to Lanesia, you want to dangle that idea? Cool.
Yeah, because I mean, have you seen their social media?
Yeah,
it's amazing.
These kids, whew, it's very hopeful. Yeah. But so there is a bigger play. It's not just about changing sort of the way the board and commission is. It's really looking at the charter and getting in. So I do think that
let's get that in the parking lot, Nancy.
Exactly, and put it up front, kind of, because I think that again, if that's going to happen, which is something that's been talked about, we don't want the train to leave the station before even at least making a formal request. So, and that formal request comes could come in the form of a letter from the Racial Equity and Justice Task Force, submitted to the first select woman as when you do this, we'd like to be considered. I mean, it could be as simple as that. So, okay.
This is we got a lot happening.
I know, my head is on fire. Anyone else have anything to add? There was a lot. So, okay, I'm gonna cut us so that we don't get burnt out. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I'll make the motion.
Karen Lynch. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
And I'm also going to put in your heads before, as I dangle this, we're just going to need to vote on note takers for next time. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And
thank you so much.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Steve, fabulous. Ken, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, so much.